There is a moment, you've probably had it, where something genuinely good happens to you. Not catastrophically good, not life-altering in any cinematic way, just quietly, genuinely good. And instead of settling into it, instead of letting it land, something in you begins, almost immediately, to move. Not away from the good thing, not toward it either. Just sideways. A kind of lateral drift, quiet and involuntary, like a body compensating for unexpected weight. This is not about gratitude. It's not about pessimism. It's about something older than both of those things. Something that runs underneath the story you tell about yourself. And it is, in its own strange way, worth sitting with. Imagine this. You receive the email on a Tuesday, late morning. The light through the window is unremarkable, just ordinary autumn light, slightly yellow, slightly tired. The email says what you had been hoping it would say for 7 months. You read it once, then again, then a third time, slower. And for approximately 4 seconds, something opens in your chest. A warmth, a loosening. Something that might, if it were allowed to fully arrive, become joy. But before it does, before it crosses whatever threshold separates anticipation from arrival, your hands move to the keyboard, not to reply, just to hover, and your eyes move to the window, and something in your mind, something quiet and automatic and very, very fast, begins to run a different calculation entirely. It doesn't announce itself. It never does. It doesn't say, "This is too good," or wait for the catch. It simply begins. Scanning. The way a room falls quiet before a storm that may not even come. You find yourself thinking about the project timeline, the variables still unresolved, the colleague who smiled a certain way in last week's meeting. You catalog small risks, like a person sorting through a drawer they already know is empty, just to be sure. Just to be sure. The warmth in your chest is still there. But something has been placed over it, carefully, like a hand pressed gently over a flame, not to extinguish it, just to contain it, just to manage it. Later, when a friend asks how you're feeling, you will say, "Good," and you'll mean it. But the version of good you deliver will be smaller than the one you actually felt, more compact, more reasonable, stripped of its original dimensions, folded neatly into something that can be handed across a table without alarming anyone, including yourself. Because somewhere in the moment between receiving the good news and processing it, an older part of you made a quiet decision. Not yet. Not fully. Not without reservation. This is not pessimism. The person experiencing this is not cynical. They are not broken. They are simply someone who has lived long enough to know that good things don't always stay. And so the nervous system, that ancient, practical, deeply unromantic system, does what it was trained to do. It waits. It hedges. It holds part of you in reserve, like someone keeping one foot on the shore, even as they wade into water. The water may be warm, the water may be fine, but the foot stays, just in case. Watch closely now, because the behavior that follows is subtle enough to miss if you're not paying attention. And yet, once you see it, you will see it everywhere. In yourself. In people you love. In strangers across a dinner table. The pattern begins not with action, but with calibration. The same person who received the email on Tuesday. By Thursday, in a meeting, when someone asks about the project's progress, they describe it as coming along, not thriving, not confirmed, coming along. They use the exact language of uncertainty even when certainty has arrived. They do this without deciding to. They do this the way you breathe, continuously, automatically, as a background function of simply being alive. At dinner with friends, someone raises a glass and says, "To you." And our person, this person who received the email, who felt the warmth, who deserves the toast, smiles and says, "Honestly, it's not that big a deal." And they almost believe it. The irony is one of the softer forms of self-protection. It preempts vulnerability by volunteering smallness before anyone else can impose it. "It's not that big a deal" means, please don't make this large, because if it becomes large and then disappears, the fall will be proportionate. Containment as survival. In their romantic relationship, the shift is even quieter. Their partner notices, though they would struggle to name what they're noticing. It's something like a slight reduction in presence, not coldness, not distance. More like a dimming, a withdrawal of exactly the portion of themselves that would be most damaged if things went wrong. They are still there, still warm, still caring. But they are there the way someone stands in a beautiful room while keeping one hand on the door handle, present and poised, simultaneously. These behaviors are not calculated. That's what makes them so difficult to address. They were learned in rooms that no longer exist, in conversations that ended decades ago, in the specific texture of a childhood where good things sometimes came with conditions attached, or came and then were taken, without explanation, without warning, in the ordinary and devastating way that life takes things from children before they've developed language for loss. The nervous system recorded all of it, not as memory exactly, more as expectation. A soft architecture of anticipation, built from repeated experience, now running silently beneath every positive event, like a low hum beneath music. You don't hear it until the room is very quiet. And most of us work very hard to ensure the room is never that quiet. The outward competence makes it stranger. Because from the outside, this person looks entirely capable. They deliver good work. They maintain relationships. They move through the world with the kind of functional confidence that people sometimes mistake for ease. But ease and competence are not the same thing. You can be very good at navigating a landscape you never fully trust. You can be skilled and still be, underneath the skill, slightly braced. That low-level bracing, the way they sit with their shoulders marginally higher than comfort would require, the way their breath never quite reaches the bottom of their lungs in moments of success. That is the body keeping score in the only way it knows how. Quietly, persistently, without complaint. Here is something worth understanding about the brain. It is not primarily a happiness machine. It is a prediction machine. Its central function, its oldest, most deeply conserved function, is not to feel good. It is to model what comes next, to anticipate, to reduce uncertainty wherever uncertainty feels dangerous. And for many people, happiness is a form of uncertainty. Not because they don't want it, but because it marks a high point. And high points, the nervous system has learned, are followed by descents. This is called predictive processing, the brain's constant construction of expected futures based on the accumulated weight of past experience. If your past contains enough instances of good things not lasting, and most pasts do in ways large and small, then your nervous system begins to build happiness into its risk models, not as an outcome to pursue, as a variable to manage. There is a metaphor that feels right here. Imagine a room you've lived in for years. The room has a particular quality of light in the late afternoon. Golden, specific, brief. You've seen it hundreds of times. And every single time, without fail, it has ended. The light moves. The room goes back to its ordinary gray. Now imagine the moment when the golden light arrives. The eye sees beauty. But the mind, somewhere beneath the beauty, has already begun counting. Already begun noting the angle of the sun, the time remaining, the imminent return of gray. And so the experience of the light, that genuinely lovely particular light, is experienced simultaneously with its anticipated absence. The warmth and the loss layered, not one after the other, together, at the same time. This is not pathology. This is the architecture of a mind that has learned, correctly, that nothing is permanent. The problem is not the knowledge. The problem is when the knowledge arrives before the experience has even finished happening, when the anticipation of loss colonizes the present moment so completely that the present moment is never fully inhabited. When you are always, slightly, already in the next room, already in the aftermath. And here is where early experience does its most lasting work. The nervous system that first encountered instability in childhood, where love was unpredictable, where safety was conditional, where good things came attached to invisible strings. That nervous system did not simply record those experiences as memories. It calibrated around them. It built a set of baseline expectations so deeply embedded that they now operate without consultation. Without consent, the person standing in the good news, scanning for risk. They are not being irrational. They are being faithful to an old map. A map drawn in rooms that no longer exist, by hands that have since grown, by a self that has, in many ways, already survived the things it fears. But maps don't update automatically. The territory changes. The map remains. And so you navigate new landscapes with old instructions. Careful, precise, slightly wrong in ways you can feel, but not always name. There are fragments sometimes. A childhood kitchen, the specific sound of a door, an afternoon that felt, briefly, like everything was fine, and then wasn't. These fragments don't announce themselves as explanations. They arrive sideways, the way most important things do. A smell, a quality of light, a feeling in the chest that doesn't match the room you're currently standing in. The body is very literal in its memory. It stores not just what happened, but how it felt to wait for what happened. That waiting, that specific texture of anticipating the end of something good, is what gets activated now. In the Tuesday morning email, in the raised glass, in the quiet dinner where everything is fine. Everything is fine, and the body nonetheless waits. At some point, if you are paying attention, and paying attention is difficult, because it requires a kind of stillness most of us spend considerable energy avoiding. You begin to notice the pattern, not as a revelation, not as a sudden, clarifying insight, more like the way you come to recognize a recurring sound in an apartment you've lived in for years. At first, it was just part of the atmosphere. Then one day, it separates from the background and becomes distinct. And you realize it has always been there. The person from the email. It happens on a Sunday, weeks after Tuesday. Nothing dramatic prompts it. No crisis. No therapy session. Just a Sunday afternoon with enough space in it that their mind, unoccupied, turns and finds itself looking at itself. They are sitting with tea that has gone slightly cold. The light in the room is the ordinary kind. And they notice, quietly, without urgency, that they have been doing something. That there is a behavior running on a kind of loop around every good thing that arrives in their life. A slight muting, a slight stepping back, a slight management of experience. and for the first time, instead of continuing the behavior, they simply observe it. Not to fix it, not to understand it, not yet, just to see it. There is something strange about seeing a pattern for the first time, because it doesn't disappear just because you've seen it. It's still there, still running, but now it is running in a room with a witness. And something about being witnessed, even by yourself, especially by yourself, changes the texture of the experience. Not the experience itself, just the relationship to it. They don't stop being cautious with good things. They don't suddenly allow happiness to land without reservation. The foot is still on the shore, but now they know about the foot. And there is something in that knowing, not comfort exactly, not relief, more like a kind of honesty. The acknowledgement that they are doing something, and that the something makes sense, and that making sense doesn't automatically mean it serves them. Here is what philosophy has circled for centuries, in language alternately beautiful and frustrating. The desire for permanence is written into the experience of impermanence. We want things to last precisely because they don't. And we brace against good things precisely because we want them to stay. The bracing is a kind of love, distorted by fear. The vigilance is desire, worn inside out. To manage happiness is not the opposite of wanting it. It is often the most direct expression of how much we want it. There is a quality of light that exists in rooms where the curtains are mostly drawn. Not darkness, just a kind of muted brightness. Light that has entered but hasn't fully arrived. That feels somehow like the right image for this. Not black, not fully illuminated. Something in between, which is where most of us actually live, most of the time, whether or not we acknowledge it. And perhaps that's enough to notice that the in-between is not a failure state, that the partial arrival of good things is not a malfunction. That bracing and wanting can occupy the same body, the same breath, the same Tuesday morning. The tea is cold now. The afternoon continues. Nothing has been resolved, because resolution was never really the point. The point was the noticing. The willingness to sit in a quiet room with the question and not immediately reach for an answer. To let the question be, not a problem to be solved, but a space to be inhabited. You've probably had this. The good thing arriving. The instinctive sideways drift. The managed warmth. The foot on the shore, and if you've recognized somewhere in this the texture of your own interior, then perhaps that recognition is its own quiet form of arrival, not the happiness you were defending against. Something smaller and strangely enough, more durable. The simple act of seeing yourself clearly, without flinching, without immediately looking away. That's something. That's actually something.